and thanks for joining us. Today, Ugly Duckling gets more upgrades. You guys may be getting tired of seeing the duck on the table, but I'm still upgrading it and getting it where I want it for this year's Winter Series. So, what's next? Today, we're going to be adding a low center of gravity skid plate to this truck from Fish's Crawler Parts. Let me show you the piece we're going to be adding. And here it is. This is the low center of gravity skid plate from Fish's Crawler Parts that we're going to be putting on Ugly Duckling. I got this in orange and also got Prime RC engraved upon it. You can order these in a number of different colors from Fish's Crawler Parts and get pretty much anything you want engraved on them. They also offer these in two versions, in standard and low center of gravity. I went with the low center of gravity version. Something real cool before I compare this to the stock skid plate I want to show you is it comes already with the holes drilled and the mounts, so you can run the transmission on either side. This is, if you decide to flip the transmission, you don't have to pull the skid plate out and turn it. So kind of a neat little feature there. This is a beautifully printed piece. Now, why low center of gravity? What makes this better than a standard skid plate? The first thing you'll notice right off the bat is it's a little bit skinnier. It does not have these tabs here on it. These right here, you'll just mount the links directly to the chassis. You may have to put a little spacer about that thick in there, depending on your chassis and your link setup. You may not. If you do, you can probably have these spacers in your parts box. If not, you can go get them from any local hardware stores. Just a little round spacer, basically a little bushing, will work. Okay, the other thing you might notice right off the bat is this right here is kind of slowly slopes up. Fish's Crawler part is a little bit quicker, but it's also a lot smoother. Let's look at these link mounts here. Notice the stock ones are straight in, and then out here it's angled at the edges. While the Fish's Crawler parts, this way you mount the links angled the whole time. That way it helps prevent binding, because normally the screw goes straight through this way, and your link then runs at an angle like this, so it's already in a little bit of a bind. This way the links can just kind of go naturally, and your pivot point is in the center of the link. It's not angled over to the side like it is on the stocker. So what makes this a low center of gravity skid plate? Let's take a look at the stocker here. If you notice where the transmission mounts here, it's up pretty high above the skid plate. On the Fish's Crawler Parts piece, the transmission mount is a lot lower. I mean, granted, it's just a couple millimeters, but whenever you get into adding the weight that we add to these trucks, like you take a transmission with full metal gears inside, you know, a big brushless motor hanging off of it, even if you've upgraded maybe to a metal case, that little bit moving it down can make a world of difference in getting that center line of your weight lower in the vehicle. Speaking of weight, how does this weigh compared to the stock piece? Let me take out these screws here and we'll find out. We'll put the stocker on my scale first. Weighs in at 22 grams. Now let's check the Fish's Crawler Parts piece. Huh, look at that. The exact same weight, 22 grams. Yeah, honestly, I didn't expect that. I expected the Fish's Crawler Part piece to be a little bit heavier because the stock piece, feels flimsy. It is flimsy. It does flex. The Fish's Crawler Part piece does not flex at all. So I guess it's just the added material makes it stronger, but without having these extra pieces sticking out here, you don't have the weight. So that's actually pretty cool. I wasn't expecting that. So both of them weigh in at 22 grams each. So now we're just going to tear this truck apart and replace this skid plate, the stock skid plate, with this one. Let me show you what all is involved in this. First and foremost is we have to remove the body. If you have an aftermarket chassis, this is a lot easier to do. On an aftermarket chassis, these are flat, so pretty much all you have to do is take out the 4 bolts on each side of the skid, unbolt the transmission, drop your links, and pull the skid right straight out the bottom. Since this is the C-channel chassis on here, and I'm still running the stock chassis, it's a lot more involved. You pretty much have to take out all the screws down the whole side, one side of it. You pretty much have to remove one whole C-channel rail from the truck to remove the skid plate. That's fine. It's not that hard to do. I just want you to be aware of that. So that's what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and remove the screws down one side. We're going to pull this chassis plate out of the way and pull the skid plate and then swap in the new one. I went ahead and removed the wheels so that way it'd make it a little bit easier to get to everything. You may not have to remove your wheels and tires, but it just makes things easier. And plus I'm using my tires back here as a little brace to help hold the vehicle level. So now all it is got to remove these screws, like I said, down the frame rail. And that will let me pull the frame rail off. I also need to cut a couple zip ties here that have holding the wire to the ESC. At this point here, I've taken out all the screws except those that hold the links in place. Those will come next after I flip it over and take out these middle screws here that hold the skid plate. Also, I've left the ones up front to hold my bumper mount in place because this cross member I have here is plastic. A lot of it's been trimmed away, so without the rest of the supports in place, it should give me enough room to pull the chassis up to allow me to slide out the skid plate. So next thing I'll do is take out the screws on the other side, remove the links, the transmission, and then the final bolts here to drop the skid. So let's get started on that. Okay, all these screws are out. Now I should be able to just pull this chassis to the side and drop that skid plate. Let's find out if I can do that without removing that front screw. There we go. We're going to put the skid plate between the chassis rails. And then we will probably, I'm not going to say for sure, but probably mount the upper links to the chassis, and then mount the transmission to the skid plate, then the lower links. Yep, there we go. Now something I do need to point out on this is these right here on the normal stock skid plate, you have two little nubs that stick out to hold it in place. On the Fisher's Crawler part one, you will need to get some screws out of your parts box. I'm going to put some K&K hardware in there to hold these middle ones in. I'm going to start by putting in a screw that holds the slider on. Put it on and then line it up and get it into the skid plate. For these ones right here, I'm putting in 3mm by 6mm screws. You don't have to go as long as these ones here because they're not going through your slider mounts. And 3x6 seems the perfect length. Now next up, I'm going to go and mount the upper links here to the chassis. Like I said before, you may need spacers. What I'm going to use are these right here. Little cone-shaped spacers with a 3mm hole through the middle. I will use these to space my links out where I need them. Like I said, you may not need to. If you're running a flat chassis, you won't need to, but where mine's C-channel, I have to get my clearances I need. You can find regular spacers that aren't conical shaped at your hardware store. More than likely, I have a local Ace Hardware here I get all my weird stuff like this from. Now here you can see why I put the conical washer in, because it moves this link out enough to clear my C-channel. Oh, now just to do the other three. Now we got the links mounted, we're going to mount the transmission to the mount, to the skid plate here. So let's go ahead and work this up here where it needs to be. The transmission is now mounted to the skid plate, so the next step is to mount these lower links. To mount the lower links, Fisher's Crawler Parts uses these, for lack of a better term, let's call them really long set screws. They have a hex head in the end of them, so you can screw them in. So I'm going to go ahead and get all four of them screwed back into the skid plate and ready to mount the lower links on. Then I will get the drive shafts mounted on, then put the lower links into place. I now have all the screws to the lower link mount screwed in far enough so I can drop the links in and screw them in to hold them in place. Something I forgot to mention earlier, which you may notice now, is you notice that these links right here are closer together than these ones right here. Just be aware of that whenever you put it in. It will give you a little more triangulation on whichever ends you face these two towards. I'm facing these towards my rear because I do have longer links there. And I think it'll just work out better and give me less binding. Where in the front, I won't have shorter links. So the little more extreme angle may cause a little bit of binding at the axles. But so like I said, I'm running it the more triangulation on the rear. Make sure before you tighten these down that you go ahead and get your drive shafts put back in. So much easier to do now than later. I put paint marks on my drive shafts so I know where I'll line them up. And now what's left to do is put back together all the screws that go through the chassis into the bracings. I'm redoing right now the front shock tower. Next I'll do the rear shock tower. Something I do want to point out though, just to help my center of gravity a little bit more, I'm going to try something different. I want these RPM shock towers here. The upside of these is that they are fully adjustable. So I'm going to move the shock mount from here up to this hole just to lower it just a little bit. Maybe bring that COG down just a touch without sacrificing too much ground clearance. Now that the shocks are on, the only thing left to do is put the tires back on and then drop the shocks on the other side. Okay, tires are on. Now to flip it over and adjust those other two shocks. We now have the fish's crawler parts, low center of gravity skid plate fully installed. Everything on this truck is back together. You can see here what I was talking about earlier as I zoom out. There's more triangulation on the rear than the front. I prefer this method. So like I said, you have the option though, whichever way you turn it, but I would definitely run more on the rear, especially if you're running longer links on the rear. The only thing I got left now to do is tidy up a little bit of this wiring, and we'll be ready to hit the trail. Now the question is, why go through all this trouble? What's the point of going through all the headache and hassle of changing this skid? Well, the obvious one is, as I said before, your center of gravity does get lower by doing this. I have moved the motor, which is a Holmes Hobby 2200 stubby brushless, and the transmission, which is full of hot racing metal gears. I've moved them down slightly. That in the end has moved the center of gravity for this truck closer to the bottom line, closer to the ground. The upside of doing this is now whenever this truck is on a climb, on a steep climb, or maybe it's going on an off camber on a side hill, this weight is lower. It's closer to the ground, so there's less chance of the vehicle tipping over or falling end over end down a hill. That's the advantage of doing this. Now also this skid plate right here, as you notice, is smooth. So she should slide a lot better than the stock piece, which though while smoothish, still had a lot of ridges in it. Another advantage is, if you're running a big brushless motor, or even a big brushed motor, is this piece is sturdier than the stock piece. You're going to get less flex. So now we got to go off and run this truck and see how well she does out there. Another advantage of running the lower center of gravity skid plate is it moves the transmission down just a little bit, and that in the end can give you more clearances for interiors. In Ugly Duckling, I am running an interior. Even though it's not a full interior, it's kind of like a half interior. Still, a little bit of extra clearances can make a world of difference. Now, aiding the LCG skid plate is also in the front and rear axles is a set of gunner tubes. They are steel tubes that run the length of the axle here from the middle to the outside, and they add strength and weight down low to the axles. That way it keeps from snapping the black plastic casing as easy, and adds a substantial amount down low. So all these little things we can do like that to get the weight lower means better side hilling, better climbing, and overall a better performing truck. back to the workbench. I hope you enjoyed seeing Ugly Duckling out there running around. After some testing, what do I think of the Fisher's Crawler Parts low center of gravity skid plate? Personally, I love it. It's amazing the difference it makes. Just moving the transmission down just a little bit moved some weight lower. And every ounce of weight you can move lower will help stability of the vehicle. What about durability? How well did it hold up? In the video you saw that some of those rocks were pretty sharp and jagged. How well did it take being drug across them? Well, let's take a look. You can see it got some scratches on it, but otherwise it held up flawlessly. It took a lot of abuse out there. Those are some pretty sharp rocks, and as you can tell, I am not easy on any of these parts on the bottom of the vehicle. I drag them across whatever happens to be in their way. So what are my final thoughts? My final thoughts is this. If you get this skid plate, you will not be disappointed. Whether you have just a trail rig, or if you comp with it, or both, the performance gain is worth every penny. It's also very easy to install, fits like it's supposed to, and in the end, improves performance. So it's a win-win-win. Like all of their parts, all Fisher's Crawler Parts pieces, it is very well made, and you'll never have a problem with it. Also on this truck right here, in addition to the skid plate, I also run their spring retainers on all four corners. I run HPI shocks on this that are kind of fat, so I run the Wraith spring retainers on this one. On my other SCX-10, I run their standard SCX-10 retainers. I will throw a link to their Facebook page down below, so go there and check them out. Check out all the other parts they offer. They offer parts for your trail rigs and your comp rigs. So a wide plethora of parts, so make sure you check them out. Also, feel free to check out our Instagram feed. The link to it is also down below. We post a lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff that never even makes it to videos, so make sure you check that out. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below, or email us, hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. We'll do our best to answer any questions you have. And until next time, happy RCing.